Hi, everyone. Welcome to our session. I'm Wesley Holden. I'm the community manager here at Totara Learning. Thank you for joining us today. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask them in the Q&A area or the chat. Let me know if you have any problems hearing me. We're seeing my screen, and I'm just going to go ahead and jump in. So today's session, we are focusing on appraisals. Appraisals are a performance management tool that everybody's fairly familiar with. Typically, if you're in L&D, it's used for doing staff reviews, for assessing how people are doing at their job throughout the course of the year, what skills they need to work on, what input or feedback they have from their manager or manager's manager or colleagues. So all of those pieces are something that we need to be able to track about our staff. And in a lot of our cases, they're things that our clients need to track about their staff. And so the goal with Totara Learn is that you have the ability to track learning, but you can also track your appraisals and staff development as well. Because honestly, those pieces go hand in hand. So the three big goals for this session, we're going to talk through some terminology just for folks that may be unfamiliar with appraisals or unfamiliar with appraisals within Totara. We're going to talk through the functionality that's available in the system, and then we're going to walk through, and actually for functionality, we're going to walk through it. And then we're going to go through from a couple of different user perspectives, both from an administrator's perspective of how to go and actually set up appraisals and make them available to users. And then we're going to look from both a staff manager, so someone who manages other people, from their perspective, as well as from a learner or staff member's perspective, what a performance appraisal can look like. I'm going to keep the PowerPoint itself pretty short. We're just going to talk through some terms to start with. So an appraisal, and keep in mind these are the definitions from within Totara, the ways that the functionality are actually referred to. So an appraisal is actually the thing. It's the piece of functionality that allows you to go through and ask users questions, have other people respond, and keep track of your staff development. So it's literally a form that we're going to build in the software, just like you would build like a quiz or a survey or anything else. It's going to be something we build out using the functionality. A stage is a time period within an appraisal. So for example, and this is the example that we'll use when we actually build the appraisal in the system. I like to meet with my employees 3 times a year. Often there's a lot more meetings than that where we're coming together and like working with learning plans and assigning competencies or, more individual skills or things like that. But overall, generally, I like to meet with folks 3 times a year. We meet at the beginning of the year, sometime in January, to kind of set the scope for the year, set our goals up, find out what a person is looking to do, like if they are looking for advancement within that year, or if they have some skill development they want to do within that year. So that would be one stage. A second stage is a check-in kind of in the middle of the year. And oftentimes this is going to be dependent on the business, and how a business runs their appraisal process. So keep in mind that this is, your mileage may vary when it comes to these stages. So we meet up in the middle of the year, we check on the user's progress, we see, if they've completed all of the skill training they're looking for, maybe we add some new skills or look for some more advanced training for them to go through if that's something they want to do. And then I might have a third stage at the end of the year where we do sort of final assessment. We review where they stand after, a full year of development. So the stage is the time period. A page is literally a page that we're going to build into the appraisal. So one appraisal can have multiple pages, and it's essentially like pages of questions. Think about, think about 15 to 20 years ago. You walked into, do an appraisal with someone, and you literally had pieces of paper in your hand. So the pages are going to be, the questions that you want to ask, the items for review, that sort of thing. And we can have multiple pages within a single stage. Then we have questions that we put on those pages. So again, you'll see things like rating scales or multiple choice. What areas do you want to work on? Or, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate this person on, their interpersonal skills, that sort of thing. The final piece is the term assignment. So within an appraisal process, assignment actually refers to assigning the appraisal to who it needs to be completed about and who it needs to be completed by. So we're going to walk through all of these in context within the software, but I just wanted to present those because some of those terms are used, like page and assignment are both used at the course level as well. So I just wanted to make sure folks knew that this was a separate, separate term. Then we're going to look at process, and this is what we're going to walk through next. This is my last slide until towards the end. First, we're going to go through from an administrator's perspective. We will create a brand new appraisal. We will add questions to it, create our stages, pages, and questions, assign users to it, and make it active so that users can actually access it. Then we're going to go take a look from a manager and staff perspective. We're going to see what notifications look like, how to complete an appraisal, and view the reporting related to it. So resources, and we'll come back to this at the end too. There's a lot of different places to get information. The big one for right now would be the Totor.help site. Oops, sorry, let me get back to that. The Totor.help site, documentation on how to create appraisals, how users can work through them, what the question types are, etc. And you can also go to the Totor demo site, demo.totorlearning.com. It is currently a version 11 site, which will be upgraded to 12 in the near future. But it's a place to go play, go build an appraisal, see what it looks like, try out questions, things like that. So that's sort of the lay of the land for the next 23 or so minutes. If you have questions as we go, please feel free to pop them in the Q&A area or in the chat, and I will cover them as we go, or if there are things at the end that we didn't cover, we'll come back to them. So I'm going to go ahead and now get onto my site. And what I have is a TotorLearn 12 site. So this is the 12.0 first release of the new version. So look and feel may be a little bit different for you depending on what version of the software you're using. I'm going to go ahead and log in first as a site administrator because we're going to look again from that building perspective first. And this is just like my little local site, so there's not a ton of data, but it does give us a perspective of what a brand new system install is going to look like and how things are going to work for us. So a couple of things while that's loading. One is that you can have many appraisals on a site. It's not like you get one. And we may build appraisals for different reasons. There may be one appraisal that is sort of a general appraisal that applies to everyone. It's the one that you sit down with your manager and do throughout the course of the year. There may be other appraisals that are more specific. Like, for example, an IT team might have a specific appraisal about technical skills that they want to do. So you can have one user can have multiple appraisals that they are completing, not just about themselves, but potentially about other users as well. If I'm a manager, there may be an appraisal for me and my work, but then there will also be appraisals for the people that I manage that I'm going to be completing. So there are sort of a few levels to this process. The first thing we're going to go in and do is go in and build it. Now, keep in mind, depending on what version you're running, you may have a different administrative menu. If you're on version 11 and prior, you'd go under Site Administration and you'll see an Appraisals area. I'm going to go up to the new Site Admin panel because I'm on version 12. And under Performance, I'm going to go into Appraisals. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that with performance management tools, they aren't necessarily something that everyone rolls out on their system in their first phase of release. Sometimes you get your learning set up, get your site configured, your reporting and all of that, and then sometimes doing performance is sort of a phase 2 or a phase 3 part of getting the software set up. That's totally fine. We don't need to necessarily throw all of these pieces out all at once when we're rolling out a system for someone, because that can be kind of overwhelming. So the system comes with one example appraisal already built in, so you have something to go in and kind of poke around at and just see what an appraisal can look like. But just a couple things. We're going to give our appraisals very unique names so that we can tell based on looking at them as an administrator which one we're talking about. Like, I didn't do great with my examples here. We're going to be able to see things like the start date, when it became available for users to start completing, how many folks it's assigned to and how many have completed it. The status, so in this case, an active appraisal is one that is out and available to users to complete. A draft appraisal is one I'm still building, so no one can see it except for the administrators on the site and anyone else you've given permissions to build appraisals. Then there are some options over here, just getting into editing the settings, duplicating. So if you create an appraisal and if you're basically doing the same appraisal every year, you can actually just hit the button to copy it, change the stage dates, and release the new one. We can delete old appraisals. So if, I went in, I played around, and I built one and decided I don't actually want to release that and I want to get rid of it, I can fully delete it. Noting that if you have an appraisal that people have completed and you try to delete it, it's going to take their answers with it. And then we can either activate the appraisal, make it active for users to be able to access, and we'll talk again and through what that process means in a little bit. And we can also close appraisals. So if it's the end of the year, people have done their appraisals, or we would just sort of want to close it out for the year and archive it, we can do that just by closing it. Or if I realize, I built one and I missed a page of questions or something like that, I can close it and build a new version of it to make it available. So let's go ahead and start from scratch. I'm going to create an appraisal. The first thing I'm going to do is give it a name. So this is going to be my maybe a template appraisal. Because one thing I like to do personally is I'll go and build a template, using the questions and things that I like, and then in the future I'll be able to duplicate that one and use it for my newly released appraisal. So actually, let's just go ahead with a live one. Let's say that this is my 2019 appraisal that's going to go out for all of my users. Okay. The next step is to build in some content. So who is this actually going to become, what are we actually going to have people do in this? Then we're going to talk about who, and then we're going to talk about how to get them notifications. So first I'll add my stages. And again, I like that 3-stage setup. So we're going to call this our setup stage. And I can give it a description if I want, just to sort of explain what this stage is for. We can set up when this needs to be completed. So something to keep in mind is that appraisals have a time limit. They have to be completed by some time. And so in my case, I could skip this date for now and come back and fill it in later, like if I was creating a template. But in this case, I'm going to say that this is going to be my live appraisal, and I want people to complete this first stage, let's say by the end of March. But if I didn't know what the date was going to be, I could always leave that empty for now and come back to it. When a stage is completed, what happens? Can people come back and change their answers, or do we want to lock it up so that we always have an archived view of what it looked like? In my case, I'm going to lock the learner's answers and the manager's answers, but maybe I'll leave these other couple of roles available to go and make edits if they need to. So what the system is doing for these various roles, and we'll talk through this again. We have our learner. This is who the appraisal is about. We have our manager. This is the person who, within the system, is set as the manager of this other user. Manager's manager, pretty straightforward. That's the person who manages this person. And then finally, there can be an appraiser. So sometimes you might have someone like from HR or like when I used to work for a university system, there would be like a third-party person that would come into like interviews and things like that, where they were like an objective person to be involved in the process. And so that might be the appraiser. They're coming through and just sort of making sure that there's sort of fairness and stuff like that. Oftentimes, though, it's an HR person. You don't have to use all of those roles within your appraisals. You just get to use the ones that make the most sense for you. Now, this final piece allows me to create a bunch of pages all at once, but I'm going to skip that for right now and just add a single page at a time. So we've got our first stage. And next, I want to add pages to that stage. So what are we actually going to have people do as part of this process? So I'm going to add a new page. I'm going to give it a name. I'm going to call this Review Learning. You can add as many pages as you want. This might be new skills. Oops. And then I'm going to go through and I'm actually going to add questions to it as well. So if I click over here, I can choose various question types, so entering things like dates, uploading file attachments, long text would be a big HTML area. We can have things like multiple choice and rating scale. So you go through and you can build your questions, and let's go ahead and build a long text area, because that's a really common one. So, what areas or would you like to see improvement on, let's say? Because in this case, I need to decide who is going to answer this question. Now, the learner maybe should answer it about themselves, so we can get an idea of what their goals are. But I also want the manager to answer this, because I want to see what their goals are for their employee. We can decide who is going to answer the question, who is required to answer the question. So can the person complete the appraisal without answering this question? And in my case, I don't want them to do that. I want them to have to answer this. Then I can decide on a question by question basis who can view other roles' answers. Can the learner see what the manager said? Can the manager's manager see what the learner and manager said, etc.? I'll go ahead and check both of those so everybody can see what everybody else put, basically. That's the process. I just keep going through and adding as many questions as I need. Maybe I also want to do a rating scale. We commonly see, on a scale of 1 to 5, how would you rate this person on, different things? So we might say, and I'm just putting in whatever the question text is going to be. Then I'm going to make my choices available. So in this case, we're going to say, this might be something about what level of skill someone has in a certain area. So we may say that their skill is low, that it's average, and that it's high. So this is the choice that the person's going to make. We can also have a score with it, like a point score with it. So we can say if they choose low, they get 1 point. If they get average, they get a 5. If they have a high level of skill in an area, they get a 10. So you have the ability to have both the qualitative the qualitative responses, but then also these quantitative pieces. So that if you are assessing 1,000 users, you can look at numeric scales rather than having to go through and read every single response for every person. As you're building these out, you can add as many options as you need to in terms of choices. You can also save these options. So this might be my low, average, high scale, because honestly, you might use the same choices a lot within the same, the same rating scale within the same appraisal. We decide how the question is going to be displayed. Do we want radio buttons or a menu of choices? And then down below, we decide on permissions. We can inherit the permissions from the preceding question. So you can see that. Or if I want to, I could come through and tweak these. So maybe in this case, let's make it so that the learner can't see what the manager said, but the manager can see what the learner said. Otherwise, we'll require this, and hopefully both of these folks will have a good answer for us. On my other page, what I want to do is actually pull in stuff from the rest of the system. So it's like, I have all this great learning data. Why not use that as part of my appraisal process? So if I have a site where I'm using learning plans, what I can do is say, along with those questions we're asking, let's also review the competencies this person's been assigned. Let's review their skills. So I'm going to choose to review the competencies from the learning plan. I'm going to add that as part of this appraisal page. Let's say review competencies. I might say something much more deep than that. Let's review the skills that you have, been assigned based on your position and organization, blah, blah. You can also include the rating. So in this case, when me and my manager sit down and work through this appraisal, they can say, oh, and I can mark your competencies as complete or proficient or whatever I need to by including this rating, so that the appraisal actually feeds back to the learning side of things. If I want to ask questions or get information, get comments about these, then I can turn on multiple fields. So this will actually turn on essentially comment areas where I can respond to questions about the competencies or things like that. And then down below, if I want to, I can inherit permissions again. And this is where permissions get a little bit trickier. So when it comes to competencies, in the learning plan, you've decided who gets to mark a competency as proficient or not. If only the manager has been allowed to do that within the learning plan, the appraisal will know that. It will inherit that same level of permission. So even though it says that the learner can answer this, it's not going to allow them to self-rate unless they're allowed to self-rate on the learning plan itself. I'll save changes, and I can make this as long or as short as I want. We could review like evidence that came in about coursework the person did outside of Totara. We can review the goals they've been assigned. We can look at their required learning, so programs, certifications, that sort of thing. And I can also add things like an aggregation of the rating questions so that one page of this could actually include those scores. And I can also have things like fixed text or redisplay previous questions that I've asked on different pages. In my case, I'm going to go ahead and move on. If I want to, let's go ahead and add another stage here. So this might be my end of year review. So we're going to take it from, instead of doing 3 stages this time, we'll just do 2. And we want to review that by the end of the year. And the goal of these dates is that it helps us to get notifications and reminders out to people. Hey, you have this thing that's coming up due at this time. You need to go do it. So the next piece I typically do is I'll go over to messages. We'll come back to assignments. Messages is about notifications. What do you need to tell people to go do? We never really assume that people are going to log in and check to see if they have an appraisal to complete. We want to send them a notification saying, hey, you have an appraisal to complete. So we'll create a message. And messages can go out based on events. So it can be things like related to the stage itself. It can be when the person just gets access to the appraisal, or it could even be at the end of the year, a month or 2 before the stage is due, sending reminders out. In my case, first I'm going to send one when the appraisal is available to users, when I activate it. We're going to send it immediately when that happens. This is going to go to the learner and the manager. And we can send the same message to all roles or send a different message for each one. So the message title and the message body, this is going to be a notification the person gets in Totara, and it's also going to be an email they receive. If you want to personalize the message, you can do that. If you click into the help icon, it will give you the placeholders you can put in. So instead of just saying please go complete this, you can say, hi, so-and-so, fill in their name and fill in other things. So I can put in, let's do the person's first name. It will say hi, and then it will fill in. We're going to use those brackets to essentially say hey, fill in this value from the person's information. Please complete, the appraisal and whatever else you need to say. I can send as many messages as I want. Another good one is a reminder message when the stage is coming up. So we have our setup stage. We're going to send it. We could send it immediately when the stage becomes available, when the person needs to go and access it. What I'm going to do is send it. What do I want to do? We'll send it after, we could send it after maybe 10 days. So this became available. We're 10 days into the stage. The person hasn't completed it yet. This is their reminder of hey, you need to go do this thing. If we want to, let me get my, there we go, get that out of the way. So what I want to do is say, with this stage, we want to send out our message 10 days before it's due. We only want to send the message if the person has not completed it yet. We could also, if the person has completed it, send out a thank you message if we wanted to. Same. The building is pretty straightforward. Set up as many events as you need to, or not events, excuse me, set up as many messages as you need to. Then we're going to come and assign this. And the assignment is, who does this need to be completed about? So in my case, I've actually created an audience, and it's going to be all of the learners who are in the IT department. I could also assign this to everybody within an organization, everybody within a particular position, or even everybody in a certain organization and all of its children. So it could be everybody in the IT department and all the teams within IT, that kind of thing. I'm going to go ahead and activate this and make it available. So right now, this is actually going to make it available to my users. But there's a check that it does first. Well, it looks like one of my stages has no pages and no questions that can be answered. So I'm going to go through and get rid of that. And I'm just going to delete it out. And then I'm going to go and activate it. So it's going through and also checking things like checking to see if learners have managers, people that can complete the appraisal, those sorts of things. So the next step for me is to actually log out as an administrator and go in as a user so that we can look at this from their perspective. And I know we don't have a lot of time left, but honestly, from a user perspective, it's a fairly quick process. So I'm going to come in as a learner. I may have already received my email notification of like, hey, you need to go log into the system and do this. We can also see it within the alert dashboard, which I don't have cron running on my own machine. And so it hasn't sent off my notifications yet, but I would see an alert notification of, hey, that appraisal is available. I go to my performance area, and I can either go to latest appraisal or all appraisals. Latest appraisal, in my case, I only have one appraisal available, so I'm just going to see that one to go complete. The system has gone through and said, okay, you are an analyst, and so we've assigned the appraisal to you based on that. If a person has multiple job assignments, it will assign whatever appraisals are appropriate based on the details in those job assignments. We can see this is about Abby, and her manager is Elliot. This is a currently incomplete stage, so I can go and start it if I want to. I can talk about what I want to work on. Maybe I want to work on my interpersonal communication. I could see what my manager answered if they've already answered. I can answer my scale questions. So whatever I need to do, I can come through and complete it. I can also go and choose the competencies that I want to review. So in this case, I can actually go in and choose from the list of competencies I've been assigned. And notice I don't have the rating scale, but what I can do is come in and provide an answer. So if the question was like, how do you feel your progress is on this competency or something like that, I can provide a quick answer. I have to type something. I'm going to go ahead and complete my stage. And so from my perspective as a learner, this is complete. Now my manager needs to come in and complete their side of it, which looks pretty much exactly the same. They may have some different questions that I don't have. They may be able to see my responses, but I can't see theirs, that sort of thing. We also have this all appraisals option. So if I click into that, if I have more than just that one appraisal, and you can see I have a couple out here, we'll be able to see all appraisals that are available for me. So here's one that I had created yesterday when I was just kind of playing around. This one was actually due yesterday, so you can see that it's overdue. And if I go look at my reporting, I'm going to be able to see that this is an overdue appraisal for me. If I want to, I can save a PDF copy of this. I can also print it off if I want to. So very easy for the learner to get access to that. Let me pop out as Abby, log in as my manager very quickly, just so you can see what it looks like from their perspective. Changing my password for now. So again, I'm going to go into performance, and when I look under all appraisals, because I'm a manager, sorry, let me. So many logins. Because I am a manager, we can see both my appraisals under the all appraisals option and those that I see as a manager. So I can see Abby in here. So I can come in, do the same thing, review the appraisal, start the process, answer the questions, so whatever response I have for that. I can see the responses that my learner gave as well. And as I click through, we can also rate our competency if we need to. Then I can complete the stage. When it's complete, this appraisal is done, essentially. So when I look at my status reports, I'll be able to see that this is done for this user. The thing from the manager's perspective, to get to appraisals, if I go to the team tab, I can go and get to their appraisals that way as well. So the final piece is, again, just looking at it from an administrator's perspective. There is some reporting available for appraisals. So if I click under reports, I can see for the appraisals on the system, how many are overdue, on target, meaning that no stages are currently overdue. If I've canceled any, meaning that there was one in progress and I turned it off, and how many are complete. So we've got 1 complete and 7 that are good, but they still need to be worked on. Status report and detail report give us more information. And just to dig in a little bit further, these are both embedded reports in the system. So that is the spiel on appraisals. So I'm going to go ahead and pop back over to my PowerPoint because, again, I want to show you resources that are available to you if you need help. Community site, come and ask questions, Totara.help site, documentation. totarlearning.com. This is just our general website if you have any other questions. And then come to our demo site and you can try and build out appraisals and ask questions and see if you can answer your questions just through working with it. Couple of coming up sessions. We have an appraisals Q&A. So literally 30-minute session. It's based on, it's using Zoom as well, but you'll be able to ask questions, or if you have like best practices that you want to get, if you want to ask about particular situations where you're trying to implement something, come join us February 14th. You can sign up for that at the Totar community site. Our next topic is going to be learning plans, which is kind of the 14th as well. Learning plans are going to be talking through things like competencies and course assignments and things like that as well. So come join us for that. And we have 3 face-to-face user conferences coming up. We've got an APAC user conference coming up in Melbourne in March. More appropriate for you guys. In May, we have a London session coming up, so May 15th and 16th. Again, you can sign up for those through the totar.community site. And we also have a New Zealand session that's been scheduled as well, but I don't have the date on that in front of me. Thank you all for your time and attention. If you have further questions, please go take the appraisals course that's out on the totar.community site through the Academy. Feel free to ask questions in the discussion forums as well as in the general discussion forums that are out on the totar.community site. Thank you all for your time and attention, and have a wonderful rest of your day.